Hi, I'm Todd Nauck. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So this is part 2 of the spawn illustration I'm doing on this sketch cover. This is the inks video. So it's time to get some inked lines down on here. And so let's just get right to it. So what I'm starting with here is a green Micron pen. This green ink for the energy that comes out of Spawn's eyes. I wanted to use a green ink line artwork here so that when I add the colors it'll have more of an energy effect. And then using the traditional black ink Pigma Micron pens here for the rest of Spawn. So I'm using a 0.8. I like the thickness of the 0.8 for most of Spawn here. I'll be using the 0.8 for most of this. I will be using a little 0.1 for tighter details in the face, maybe a little bit on the skull parts of his costume here, but most of it is the 0.8. So when I'm inking, I'm considering what's in the foreground first. So starting with his head and the parts of his collar here, then I'll soon move on to that left hand. It is in the utmost foreground. So when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I'm laying down my inks is what's in the foreground. That's going to want to have a thicker line. Then the further we move back, I'll use thinner lines to create a sense of things recessing into the background. Now most of Spawn here is on the same plane, like he's right here kind of in our face, though this hand is more forward, so I am going to have slightly thicker lines, and I can always make lines thicker, so I don't go too terribly thick to start off with, because you can always make lines thicker, you can't always make the lines thinner. It's like getting a haircut. You can always take more hair off, you just can't put the hair back on. So same rule of thumb with the inking. So I start with a thickness I feel comfortable with, but if I think things need to be have a little more pop in the foreground, then I'll add more weight to those lines, or what I like to say is, or what we say kind of at the old studio, beef up those lines, make them a little more beefy, make them a little more thick. So here, this is probably the most extreme of the foreshortening here. This hand coming forward to the forearm, to the upper arm, and then we have the cape overlapping. So considering the texture of his cape, it's slightly tattered in places. So I kind of let the nib kind of dance across the page. The more pressure I put down, the thicker line I can get, the less pressure, the thinner line I can get. It's kind of subtle here with a Micron. It's not the most flexible of nibs, but I can get a little bit of a line variation with the amount of pressure that I put on the application of the pen. So, but getting some of that texture there can be really fun. Gives the viewer, gives their eye something to play with, as well as helps create the tattered texture, the gritty texture that we might want for a Spawn illustration. So another thing I consider is the black parts of Spawn's costume here. A lot of people ask, how do you figure out where to put the black parts, and what parts do you leave open or white, for the color? So the thing is, some quick rules of thumb is light source. Where is your light coming from? So here for Spawn, mostly the light is coming from above. So if it's coming from above, maybe a little bit from the side, then that's where I'm going to leave stuff open. Now I also consider the shape of each muscle. I might have mentioned this in the pencil stage as well. Bears repeating again. Consider the shape of each muscle, each body part, each whatever it is that you're drawing that needs to be black. If the light's hitting in one place, where would the black shadow fall? So like the light is hitting the top of Spawn's forehead, top of his head, so his forehead and face, that's where I'm putting the heavy black shadow. On his biceps, there'd be the lighter part on the outside, creating the front and opposite side would be where the black is. Same with like the knee here. The light is hitting the top of the knee, so the front of the knee down to the shin, that's where I'm going to have the black. And I repeat this process through the thighs, through his chest and abdomen muscles, on the knuckles of his hands, of his fingers, the palms of his hands. Everything is a shape. Sometimes it's very drastic, top, side, front, back. Some things are a bit more subtle in the shaping, especially when it comes to the body parts, the muscles. It's more curved, it's more round, so you want to try to convey that. It's challenging to learn. It's challenging to kind of get that figured out. That's why we encourage young artists to study real life. Study life drawings. Look at the shapes of the muscles. Learn the shapes of the muscles. You don't have to learn the names of the muscles necessarily, but learn the shapes as best you can. So that really helps when choosing how to render, how to shade or put in the light and dark areas on a character, especially if they have a black costume, like Batman or an X-Man or Green Lantern, you know, the black parts of his costume. You want to have these things in mind. Nightwing is another great character, pretty much anyone in the Bat family almost. So these are the things you want to keep in mind. And then also you want to keep in mind depth. Like here with the cape, lots of different folds, heavy shadow. I want to put in a heavier, thicker line to create a sense of shadow as each layer or fold of cloth folds over the next. And with Spawn, because this cape is so big, there's so many folds to it, we put in a lot of folds, a lot of lines. But I try to keep in mind the clusters of lines, the concentration of lines, and the design element of that. How many is too many in one clump? How many is too few in a certain clump? So I try to keep these things in mind so that it's pleasing to the eye. You don't want it to be too repetitive. There is a bit of a repetition to it, but you don't want it to be too repetitive where it looks too uniform. You want a little bit of chaos in there because Spawn is a chaotic character. So now I've come in with the Pentel Pocket brush pen, and now I'm spotting all the black areas that I had signified to myself with those little X's to remind myself, put black ink here. And here we go. Here's the finished inks. Thanks so much for watching. The color video will be coming soon. See you soon.